So yeah, so I'm so yeah, so I'm Logan Hall. So I actually work for PwC, which is a large consulting company, as well as tax and accounting, like and things of that nature. But yeah, so I actually work sort of on the consulting side of things. So I've been there now for about close to 4 years, and I primarily work as a project manager, working in the finance and tech space. And I'm also the leader of my own ERG group called the Stuttering Professionals Resource Group. So with that, I will pass it on to Tyler.
Hello, everybody. My name is Tyler Clemens. I am a district manager for Starbucks uh, in Murrieta in sunny Southern California. Um, I am the co-chair of the Disability Advocacy Network with Starbucks. And prior to that, I was a district manager for GameStop, where I was the founder of their employee a resource group, uh, Visible, which was dedicated to disabilities and uh, impairments. Thank you for having me.
Thank you both. It's really exciting to have such a esteemed group with us. Tonight, we're going to ambitiously cover several objectives that will talk about. We're going to learn about what employee resource groups are, or ERGs. We will discover and understand the steps to start an employee resource group at your workplace. We'll take a look at and consider potential roadblocks that one could anticipate. We'll take a look at what do successful ERGs look like, and we'll learn how to advertise employee resource groups and integrate them into the workplace. So to get us started, Logan is going to talk with us about what is an employee resource group.
Sure. Thank you, Pam. So yeah, so let's talk about what ERGs are, or employee resource groups are, right? So first and foremost, these are groups of people that usually have a common interest in something. Usually, it might be like a disability, or maybe you go through maybe cancer treatments together with maybe somebody else. But ultimately, these are groups that are employee based and employee run across companies, where everyone can sort of come together and they can feel like they are a part of something greater, and they all have something in common with each other. I think there's sort of two things that sort of like define what an ERG is. So you might have heard of things called affinity groups, right? They're very similar. You bring together a group of people that have something in common. Again, for us, it is stuttering. But ultimately, I think the difference here is the word resource. A resource group is going to bring together not only the people that have these conditions, or whatever it might be, but providing resources to them to help them, right? So in my group, for example, it's like we have about 30 people across the company that I work for, and we again, sometimes we get together, maybe once every 2 weeks, sometimes 3 weeks. But we also build out like an internal web page that has links to where you can find local speech pathologists, where you can find resources to help maybe your kid through school. Maybe your kid has a speech impediment, like, and maybe it's not you. But ultimately, it's two things: bringing people together that again have something in common with each other, and they want to find a group to share those experiences with. But it's also providing resources to them to help them get through, their condition or whatever they might be going through. So let me pause there. Tyler, Pam, do you have anything to add to this?
No, I don't.
Perfect. So in that case, let's go ahead and move on. Now that we know what a ERG is, let's talk about like the next natural question. Okay, well, great. Now I know what an ERG is. How do you actually start, right? So let's think about this first. Depending on your company's size, whether it's 100 people, maybe it's only 10 people, or it's thousands of people, it's possible that your group may already, a group that you're looking for may already exist within your company itself. Um, so so down at the bottom here, I have a just a quick little process flow here, where you can essentially use your company's resources to see whether a group like this already exists. So typically, you can go to your company's resource page, or you might go to your HR department, or again, depending on how your company is set up, they may already have a web page or some kind of resource that tells you these are the groups that we have here at our company. So I would encourage you to go out, contact your contact your HR department, or maybe it's even legal, and find whether this type of group already exists at your company. Now, it's possible that something does already exist. What do you do then? You can optionally join that group, and then it's over. You're in, great. But let's say that they have a group, but maybe it's not exactly what you're looking for. Or maybe it's not specifically tied to stuttering, or like a invisible disability, for example. You can always start your own too, right? Again, it depends on where you work and sort of how much freedom you have to do this type of thing. But thankfully, I work for a great company, and they allowed me to do this and sort of make my own group. So typically, after you figure out whether your company has one or not, or whether you want to start one of your own, you would want to create a business case and find out who are the appropriate stakeholders or approvers that need to essentially approve this group being formed, right? So oftentimes it might be, your HR department, or it might be legal. Again, the stakeholders will likely depend on where you're working and, sort of like your company structure. But typically, I would put together a business case explaining, why you want to start an ERG. What purpose is this serving? What's in it for the company, right? And again, so I'm like, we'll get to that later, like the actual benefits of, having an ERG at your company. But typically, you would want to include those types of things in your business case or business proposal, right? So, and again, so like I also mentioned things here like, your mission statement, purpose, short-term, long-term goals, and things like that. And then, once you go through that process and, hopefully it gets approved, set up some, regular touch points with those that are interested in joining, right? I think one of the challenges that we'll kind of speak to later is, okay, great, I have my group now, but how do I get folks to join? How do I get people to find my group and, start participating? But let me just sort of pause here before moving on. So we will have Tyler speak to just like a couple aspects of this later on. But any other comments from Tyler or Pam about just getting started?
I would recommend finding someone to partner with very early that shares the same passion and drive. This can be a tough thing to do alone. If you have someone else to go through it with, you get to work twice as fast.
Yeah, great point, Tyler. So with that, let's go.
I had a general quick. Oh,
Sure.
sorry, Logan. I just had a general kind of a question. I work at a smaller organization, about like 5 folks that I see every day. I'm based in San Francisco right now, so I'm curious, like, how does ERG work how does that work inside of a smaller organization? Obviously, at a larger one, you have a lot of employees. There's probably a good chance there's another person like you who stutters. In my company, I'm the only person who stutters. does this come in the form of maybe partnering with an ERG group at a larger firm, or I don't know if you've given some thought to that, but just curious about that.
So if you have, yeah, let's say you have, 5 people at your company, and, you're the only person that stutters, it may be tougher for you to create one like that. But I will say that like the NSA has, local chapters all around the country, right? And you can often find a lot of, like-minded folks there from like the local chapters. And again, I would think that is something that like you're already doing, since you're part of like the NSA, right? But ultimately, I think it makes more sense to create one when you have a company that is sizable enough where the chances of you having multiple people who stutter or, have some kind of invisible disability would sort of warrant a fully fledged group. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. That makes sense. Thank you.
Awesome. Great. Well, let's move on, and I will hand this over to Tyler to talk about what does a successful ERG look like.
Excellent. Thank you, Logan. I think when we look through an ERG, success can look a lot of different ways. It can have a variety of definitions. My initial thought is that I would advise anyone and everyone to focus small and to start with a single individual, right? If you can change a perspective, inspire or motivate a single person, and you operate through that scope, then you're able to go from micro to macro, right? And influence a larger our audience, ideally working towards changing the perspectives of others. I think for my first ERG, when I think through like my initial inspiration was to build a better environment for others like me. Like I don't have the opportunity to give myself confidence at a younger age, but I can help someone else out in that same space at this time. And as I've worked through the inclusion and diversity space going just over our 10 years now, you learn so much about others and every background and the hurdles, right? And that influences you to work even and further into how you can build a better environment for all, but by broadening those perspectives. Logan, can you move on?
Sure. I would decide to sort of one other comment here in terms of success, right? Personally, for me, when I made my group, I wanted others to, others that are going through the same thing through me. I ultimately wanted them to, join and, find a space where they feel included, where their voice is heard. Even though sometimes we stumble over our words, their voice will be heard. And, I ultimately just wanted to create like a group that will essentially, bring awareness to stuttering and ultimately, educate others about stuttering too. That's one of the big things that I like to do at my company. I like to educate others about stuttering because consulting is such a, communication heavy industry, like our line of work. I think for those that actually get into consulting that have a stutter, they're very brave people because you're constantly on the phone, you're talking to the client, you're all those things, right? But ultimately, I wanted them to feel comfortable doing their job and feel like they have someone that they can lean on, someone that they can build a relationship with, and become sort of lifelong friends in the process. But anyway, let's go ahead and move on to the next slide where Tyler will speak to how do you actually get employees to, join and get started?
Yeah. So I think that that's where there's a lot of work is getting other people to buy in and getting others to be on board. When I think through like the impairment space, right? Being the first to create a brave space, leading with vulnerability. As you show that you can step forward and be open, you might just inspire or motivate others to do the same. And I think through that question from earlier, right? When we have a small workforce, right, where you might not be able to create a resource group just based on stuttering, you might need to broaden what that group is and who I can join it. Like if we minimize the audience by getting very specific, we become a less inclusive in that process, and we don't have the ability to challenge the perspectives and perceptions of others. Honestly, if you want employees to join, you have to make it something that they feel they fit into. If we're having trouble growing our membership, we focus on allies. We focus on advocates. We ask them to help our recruit members. It's also a great opportunity to reassess your ERG and whether or not that current plan is viable. If I'm operating an ERG and it is specific to stuttering, and I can get 5 or 10 people, right? What if I take a step back and I instead focus on an ERG on impairments and disabilities? Does that number grow from 10 people to a 100? Right now, we're not only are we dealing with a much larger our audience, we're educating a large group of people at once on a variety of subjects and really increasing engagement in that process. I think the bigger the organization you have, it is going to be easier to build a group that is laser or focused, but you also lose the ability to touch an audience you wouldn't normally have access to.
And if I may, just to piggyback on what Tyler has shared, I think one of the things that I learned many years ago now is that when we are vulnerable and brave and stutter openly and we're our authentic selves, it kind of invites reciprocity. It lets other people see, oh, okay, she or he has just shared something really vulnerable and personal about themselves. So can I, maybe. And I think we who stutter should remember that we have that magic, if you will, by default. And I think people respect when we're able to be vulnerable and authentic. Just opens those brave spaces that Tyler mentioned.
Great points, Tyler and Pam, both. I would like to also add to the slide here as well. So I think we also, need to consider again, this will be different for different sizes of companies, but again, I work for a company that we have about 60,000 employees just in the U.S. alone, and over 100,000 sort of worldwide. So one of the challenges that I had when I was initially starting this, or my group at least, was how do I what mediums do I have available to me to get my word out there? And they always say that like the best form of advertisement like is word of mouth, right? When I first started this group, it was still sort of in COVID time, so we weren't exactly going to the office. There may have been some travel here and there, but when I did go to the office, I actually have a brochure here that I made just for my group here. So again, this is like the Stuttering Professionals Resource Group, and the brochure tells you about sort of the group's goals, the mission, the do's and don'ts of stuttering, who's leading it, so I was trying to be creative and try to find ways. How do I use like an elevator pitch to essentially tell someone who maybe doesn't stutter at all, maybe they're just interested in learning about how to be an ally, right? How do I convey my message to them, in a very short and simple and concise, manner. So that's why I made sort of like these brochures, right? But then also, I found that if you're working for a company of like a decent size, there will often be newsletters that come out every month, or maybe again, something like there's different mediums, but I've gotten with the people that sort of do my company's newsletters and said, hey, I've got this great group here. I think that it could touch a lot of people. Could I get just like a small blurb in your next newsletter? And they said, yes, of course. So again, be creative and think of ways where you're going to get a lot of eyeballs on your group. Again, I try to be sort of very open about my group. It's not just for people who stutter, but it's also for people who, maybe they're parents of children who stutter, or maybe they, have a loved one who stutters, right? Or maybe they just want to be an ally, right? They're curious, they want to learn more. Again, this kind of goes back to, this kind of goes back to broadening the sort of horizons, like Tyler mentioned earlier. So with that, I think we'll move on to the next slide here, which it talks about, potential roadblocks to consider when, creating an ERG. So I'll pass this off to Tyler.
All right, I'm back. Thanks. There are so many different roadblocks to I consider. Now, as I was thinking about this earlier, I was thinking through the 7 habits of highly effective at people, and with starting an ERG, I would advise anyone to start with the end and mind. And through that, you're kind of able to forecast where the roadblocks in your organization just might occur. Often that can be earning and building the trust of those in HR or legal positions to help support. Even bringing them on as partners early in that process to ensure that everything is on the right path. And then, like, I think back when I started my ERG at GameStop, and I think through the roadblocks that I had, and I heard a no, and I figured it was just the way that I had phrased the idea, right? So I actually went through and I sent my reasoning and a desire to have an ERG to who was then our senior vice president of store ops, Jason and Cochran, who's a fantastic leader. And the first thing he did was pull up my P&L that I was responsible for, right? He wanted to make sure that I was successful in my role, that I could handle and shoulder the additional workload that starting an ERG would bring. It's a big ask. There's a lot of moving parts. So as you think through it, consider yours a success and role, your level of abilities, right? And would your next level a leader sign off on you shouldering that workload? I think as you think through those, right, you can kind of help define what those next steps are. Logan's actually going to close out this slide for us, so I'll turn it back over to him.
Thanks, Tyler. All great points here. I will just add here that ultimately, if you are seriously considering making an ERG at your company, ultimately, I think, so I would say there's two kinds of people, right? There are folks who are, absolute rock stars. They're super passionate about it. They have a vision, and they can see themselves leading the group, right? But then there's folks that, really want something like this to be in their company, but maybe they're not comfortable leading it, right? So I think ultimately, having a great network and having sort of folks in your inner circle that could maybe, partner up with you and ultimately make the process easier is extremely critical. So I do have two other colleagues, they're much sort of higher than me, in terms of staff level. And one of them actually stutters themselves. And so they had a strong interest in sort of helping me get this thing off the ground, right? So again, if you're not a rock star and you don't think that you can run this whole thing yourself, just remember that this is ultimately a group. That's the G in ERG. You don't have to go into this alone. You can have a network of people that you eventually bring on to help you think about goals and think about sort of long term aspirations, like and things of that nature, right? So don't think of starting an ERG as this daunting thing that all of a sudden it's going to be like a whole other side job. No, again, I think for you to start one, if you definitely want to have some kind of vision, enough to put into a business case at least, right? But again, finding those folks in your network, or just asking those that hey, do you know of anybody that could help get this off the ground for me, and sort of help me out? I think those are some also two or three additional critical points like I wanted to share there. So with that, let's go ahead and move on to what are the benefits, right? So let me pass this, or actually, no, sorry, this is my slide. So let's talk about the benefits of creating a ERG, right? So with any kind of group that you're getting into, that's maybe sort of outside of your normal work realm, there's always going to be opportunities to sort of build yourself up as a leader, right? So prior to starting my group, I was a bit shy. I didn't really sort of make a lot of new sort of relationships sort of outside of my close circle, right? But I thought, what, hey, this is my opportunity. This is something that I'm very passionate about, and it's something that I could see myself leading, right? So ultimately, using this as an opportunity, almost like a sandbox to create opportunities, not only for yourself but for others, in public speaking, or building leadership skills, things of that nature. I think that's very, very important. And that's one of the, items that you should pitch when you present your business case. We can also talk about mentorship too. Again, I am, not the most senior guy at my company, but again, I've been there close for 4 years now. But there are folks that are, under me that I could see myself sort of, that I could see myself mentoring. Maybe they also stutter, and they want to, be a part of something larger, right? This also kind of goes back to, sort of like your high school days, almost like your college days. Do you think? I mean, there are folks that are sort of in that space that maybe they're aspiring to be in like a similar field, but maybe they're stutter, and maybe they also stutter themselves. How do you instill confidence in them that they can go on and they can do something very similar to this, right? So it's sort of like a two-way street, right? You can mentor others that maybe are not as experienced as you, but they have the drive, they have the passion, right? But then it's also about being mentored yourself, right? Again, I mentioned earlier that I have two other partners that sort of help me get this off the ground, and they mentor me too, right? So sort of both ways. This is a great sort of opportunity to create some mentorship, opportunities, for your ERG. One thing here also that we'll just talk about briefly here is increased engagement, right? So increased engagement, in this context simply means that if you create a group that again, folks are passionate about joining and they're passionate about being part of something larger, they can ultimately kind of carry that drive over to their normal work too, their non-ERG work too. So I would think that when you're passionate about something, that sort of same drive can be beneficial in like a lot of different ways, not just in the ERGs itself, but outside of it as well. I think creating your own personal value. This is something that is sort of preached at PwC, but ultimately you are responsible for your own brand. You have to build your brand. What are you the famous guy for, right? I think ultimately, doing something like this, leading something like this, or maybe not even leading, just being a part of something like this can build your personal value and sort of like your own, self-confidence too, right? Whether you're leading it or, whether you're just, taking on, small assignments sort of here and there. Ultimately being a part of an ERG, I think will increase your personal value. But again, it's all dependent on how much you personally put into it, right? You will only be as successful as how much effort you put in, right? So if you put in a lot of effort, you can be very successful with this. And I think that's sort of the key sort of takeaway. And again, networking. Again, we talked about this a little bit earlier, but when I started this group for my company, I didn't have a super large network, but through creating this, I gained one more friend over here. Oh, they stutter. Oh, this person may not stutter, but they're very passionate about helping me, right? And so it becomes a snowball effect. You can ultimately meet a lot of great people just by getting started out small and presenting to others about sort of what your ERG does and sort of how great it is and things like that. Again, in about like a year and a half, I grew my group from just me up to 30, 40 people at the company, and I even had a chance to talk to the CEO of the company about my group, right? So again, those are sort of the benefits that I personally have for starting an ERG and being active in the one. What I'll do now is let me just pass this over to Tyler just to see if he has any additional comments, and then we'll move on.
I think we can just roll it right into the next slide.
Let's do it. Yeah.
I think that they feed each other, or well, we got the circle of life here. As far as what are the company benefits, honestly, like there's nothing better for a company than engaged associates. And there's nothing more engaging for associates than feeling accepted and supported for who you are. And that's where the real value is. A driven and engaged associate stay at their place of work, and they both build and deliver experience. From the added tenure and engagement comes increased product activity, which in turn creates increased revenue, which will drive developmental and growth opportunities, which again creates a high level of employee of our retention, right? These are all great points to bring up as a backbone, right? If you want to start a resource group, you have to understand there is a cost associated, and it might not be an expense cost. It might be the cost of labor and time. And it's difficult to quantify what that a return on investment is. So you have to rely on what something as simple as a sentiment, how someone feels about their job, their role, their company, and how that in turn will make them a productive employee. Logan, do you have anything to add?
No, no. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head here. I mean, again, just like the main takeaway here is, this is a cycle, right? Sort of one thing sort of leads to another, and then, ultimately, again, this kind of creates like a snowball effect where you have, sort of continual, benefits that will not only benefit, the company, but also the employees itself, right? So with that, let's go ahead and move on to our Q&A part of our webinar here. I'll pass this off to Pam.
Thank you. Thank you both, Logan and Tyler. You guys did a great job. I felt that we were pretty ambitious when we went into this, thinking there was going to be so much to cover, but you guys made it very comprehensive and understandable, I believe. So I'd really like to hear from the audience if we have any questions or just comments or feedback. Maybe what we could do, Logan, is stop the screen share
Sure.
at this point, and just so we can all look and see each other. If people have a question that you'd like to ask, you can raise your hand physically, or you can use the raise hand option on the bottom. But we're open to hearing what people think and what your thoughts are. So, Katie, I'm so glad you're here tonight. Please.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much. This was a phenomenal presentation. Just thank you all so much. This is very timely because was literally talking with a colleague today. I've been trying to get a disability themed ERG off the ground at my workplace for some time. One of the questions that has come up as I've been talking with folks, and I really appreciate what you said about there's a lot of people who want it, but people who are willing to step up and lead it and organize it, that can be different, is a concern about if you participate in a disability ERG, are you like flagging yourself to HR basically because disability is a little bit different than some other different identities that might be in an ERG? Does it create this like really awkward, legally implicated obligation for the company? And for those of you who have done this at your companies at very large organizations, how does your ERG navigate that in relation to HR and, ADA requirements and that kind of thing?
So let me take a stab at that. So when you say, they're there might be sort of issues sort of being intertwined with the ERG and like an HR. Do you mean the fact of like disclosing that you have a disability, like because that is something that's sort of common. You hear from my company when you make yourself vulnerable and you say yes, I stutter, or yes, I have a disability. Some companies, from like an from an HR perspective, like they may not necessarily want that being sort of like recorded right, because that needs to be something that is private, or not something that is written on paper, right. When you sign up for a company and like apply for a job, you can say yes, I'm disabled and whatnot, but ultimately that those details should stay with HR, right. Now when it comes to my group, I personally have not had any issue, because one thing that we do here just to kind of get around that is like we don't have any like recorded sessions. Like we never record our touch points or anything. We just have for folks that aren't able to join, we just have like a quick follow up email, say, hey, these were the topics that we spoke about today. In case you missed it. But personally, I have not had any challenges with that so far. I'll pass this off to Tyler and see if he has anything else that he can add to this.
I don't. I'm sorry. I wish I did.
Well, I would just like to just jump in. I have not had the opportunity to start an ERG, but I think I understand perhaps where Katie's coming from. Like, it's illegal to ask a potential employee if they have a disability. So I'm wondering if Katie's wondering, is attendance at a disability ERG outing that person as having a disability that they did not disclose? Is that kind of what you're getting at, Katie?
Yes, thank you, Pam. A lot of the folks I've been talking with are people with mostly hidden disabilities. So they haven't talked to their manager, HR is not aware. And then it's like, oh, if I participate in this thing, is that going to like raise flags? And it's my manager, or, if people find out that I'm participating, is it just going to create weirdness? Exactly what you're talking about, Pam.
Right. So I would think that one way kind of around that, if we want to, use that language. I mean, we're certainly not encouraging like working the system or going around, but one could always say that they're interested in attending an ERG or a disability support group as an ally. Because we certainly need allies in the workplace, right? And I would imagine that would not be frowned upon. It would just depend on, whether or not the employee resource groups are held on company time. Like, is an employee being paid to attend these? So I mean, I think that would probably be up to the particular organization. And Tyler, I think, can speak to that a little bit more. But we all need allies, and I think I saw Annabelle make a really good comment, or to educate themselves and to help spread awareness, which are also really important. Tyler, what do you think about that? Yeah, allyship.
Yeah. So I think like that's part of the group, right? If you make an ERG that's only for people with disabilities, there's going to be a problem there, right? So it's a little bit more open and ended. When I think through the disability network at Starbucks, there's more employees that are involved that are there to support somebody else. Maybe it's a family member, a friend, a coworker, a customer, right? And so operating through like everything as virtual now, right? And so we'll have our calls, and those our virtual calls, and we might have 80 people on. We aren't asking questions. We are leading with content. Now, at Starbucks, like, we do have a brave space that's also a safe space, and so we are reserve time for those that are feeling inspired and motivated to share. But also, I do recognize not every company might treat that the exact same way. So as long as you keep that net wide, right? You don't have to go through any sort of self disclosing.
Excellent
The
point.
thing I wanted to quickly add here, I think the disclosure piece is completely your choice at the end of the day. And you don't have to disclose to HR, you don't have to disclose to any of your employees, your boss. And if you think about it, actually, as a person who stutters, it's a lot easier to disclose to other people who stutter than someone who does not. So it actually makes sense to reverse engineer the process and actually go to the ERG group first, join that first, and then tell your company about like a disability when you actually have that comfort. This is also coming from like an individual who does not. I haven't launched an ERG group, and I work at a small corporation, but just theoretically speaking, that's how it makes sense in my mind. So maybe showing HR that actually these people would be a lot more okay actually of disclosing within an ERG and then coming up to management and then HR. That could also be interesting.
Good points and very good question. I'm so glad you brought that up, Katie. Other questions, thoughts, feedback? Annabelle?
Hi. So I wanted to know, how long would you say that it took you to form the group? It was like a couple months?
That is a great question, and thank you for asking it. Ultimately, my starting of mine, at least, was a little bit rocky. I ended up like asking like the wrong people at first. Like they, I reached out to who I felt was like a logical person to ask, and they said, "Well, no, we don't exactly have anything like this," and like they didn't have somebody else I could then go ask. So I kind of had to poke around for a little bit, right? And like it wasn't super obvious. How would I start? One, right? But ultimately, the process of starting with an idea and then having something tangible. I want to say it took me somewhere between 4 and 6 months. I would say the hardest part I think was not the approval necessarily, but it was getting our name out there, like, and actually getting momentum going, right? Right. So, I mean, for like the longest time, it was me and maybe, one or two other people, and we didn't necessarily know, but sort of how do we get our word out there? How do we get our message out? But, ultimately, so we did get opportunities to, speak at other sort of, company town halls and things like that. And then it sparked a lot of inspiration and like with the audience are like, hey, I have a stutter. I should join this group. Or, hey, I'm very passionate about helping people. Maybe I should join this group. Right. So, I mean, again, I think it will look different for everyone. And, again, depending on the company size. But I would say, the process can take like as little as maybe like a few weeks, you have a very progressive company and a lot of people backing you to do something like this. It might be very quick, but again, your mileage may differ, of course.
Yeah, I was in my time at GameStop. I would say it probably took about 18 to 24 months to go through every possible process. It was not a group that was going to be rolled out on a small scale. And so that required a whole lot of hoops to jump through, a lot of partnerships. And so I think, if there's something that is pre-existing but dormant, that is something that you can operate through a much quicker. The framework already exists there. Or if there's even any framework that exists for any ERG that you could leverage to grow that faster.
Yeah. I do just want to add one more quick comment there, sort of based off something Tyler said. I mean, don't be sort of like scared away from starting a group, by just the time that it takes to get it running. I mean, like hearing 6 months, hearing 18 months, that may sound a little daunting, like, to everybody, right? But ultimately, it's about having the right connections and knowing sort of like the overall process, sort of who to speak to and whatnot, right? So again, it's like it could be a very quick process, but again, like it may be a sort of like a longer process, depending on how many hoops of depending on how many hoops of hierarchy they have to jump through, right?
We have another question from Michelle.
Hi, everybody. I just want to say this was an excellent presentation. I agree wholeheartedly with the employee benefit slide and the benefit to the company slide. But what I want to say, and this is not a criticism, but rather a comment, this does not work. This ERG model does not work for people in non-corporate employment settings. And what I mean by that is small businesses, people who work in, I don't want to call it not professional type jobs. I'm not criticizing anybody's employment by that, but waitresses, truck drivers, things like that. It doesn't work for people in rural areas. I want to encourage you, because I see this, I hear this, I get this comment all the time in a stuttering group that I moderate. I want to encourage you all who put this together to think about putting something together that specifically addresses the non-corporate working population, anything from NGOs to small businesses to rural offices, small offices, blue collar workforce, people in kind of marginal type jobs where they can't lead and not because they're pigeonholed into a job that they hate, but they have to stay there for whatever reason. I think the latest numbers are 40% of the American population is in that category. And actually the numbers of people who are working in corporate settings is below that. It's like 36% or so. So please consider doing this for the other segment of the working population.
That is certainly a good point. And we wrote a question in the chat section. If anybody's got any ideas for future topics or themes, we definitely can take a look at that. Chris Goldman also made an interesting note in the chat earlier that in a former place that he worked, their corporate, well, here I'm using the word corporate right on top of your question, but their Toastmasters group was categorized as an employee resource group, which is also interesting. Don't want to steal your thunder, Chris. Do you want to maybe just share anything about about that?
Sure. Thanks, Pam. So, yeah, I guess my former employer was a little more, I guess, liberal with the definition of an ERG. They were willing to categorize, groups that need company resources that would serve the broader community as ERGs. And Toastmasters International, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, it's a public speaking group. It's a public speaking and leadership club, and we had one at our place of employment, and we got categorized as an ERG. So we were able to do things like recruit members at ERG fairs that were held by the company and things like that. So it was a very positive engagement, I believe, and a Toastmasters is for anybody who wants to practice public speaking, but it's a very safe and very welcoming atmosphere, I believe. I'm just wondering, are there any other groups associated with, like, on the periphery of stuttering, that are considered ERGs that employees can look out for that might benefit them?
Thanks again, Chris, for the question there. I think it's like this kind of goes back to sort of Tyler's point about like making sure that like sort of like horizons are broad, right? If you kind of pigeonhole yourself into like just stuttering, then you might not get sort of as much momentum that you want. But if you open it up to just public speaking in general, which is something that is tough, not just for people who stutter, but for everybody. Everybody doesn't exactly love public speaking, but sometimes they have to do it, right? So I think so like in my company, there's similar groups for those that are deaf, or maybe sort of hard of hearing, or maybe they have like a type 1, type 2 diabetes type of group, or right. So ultimately, I think you can almost call this like a non-visible disabilities, right? And I think by doing that, you're sort of broadening yourself and sort of like your sort of like your overall scope, right? But yeah, sort of great point about it is a great point about Toastmasters. So like we also have one like in my company too, and I think there's a lot of opportunity like for sort of like cross pollination almost, right? There are folks in Toastmasters like that maybe want to learn what is public speaking like for those that stutter, right? Or or again, something like the other way around, for those that stutter, how do I get better at public speaking, right? So.
Well, Logan, since you brought that up, and not to put Chris on the spot, but we are planning that exactly for January.
Great transition.
Yeah, we're bringing, it's a nice transition, right? We're putting together an NSA Connect sessions. So NSA connects with Toastmasters International. And Chris, who is a member of Toastmasters here, and there may be others as well. Chris is leading the charge with that. Because I do think a lot of people who stutter think that they can't possibly join Toastmasters or be successful with public speaking. So that should prove an interesting conversation. We're looking at that for January 23rd. And there'll be promotion and advertising of that. And because we're not screen sharing right now, I do want to also mention that our next We Stutter at Work webinar will be the last Wednesday of March, so March 27th, on getting promoted at as people who stutter, because I think that is also a challenging a challenge. People might think that because I stutter, I'm not capable of being promoted in the workplace. So I think that's really that's also going to be an interesting session. I want to just call out and not put too much more on Katie, but Katie's comment in the chat section is really cool. Like, she mentioned it to her head of DEI where she works, and talked about wanting to potentially start an ERG, and she was told, here's the form and you can start it next week. Like, how supportive is that? That's like really awesome to see. And I'm pleased to see also Tyler. I'm sure, Michelle, you probably saw Tyler's comment there in the chat section, but Tyler is looking at, how could what we've discussed here be looked at for non-profits or smaller workplaces, because we could certainly put the same type of guidelines in place. So I just want to say thank you all to everybody who participated tonight. And again, a big thank you to Logan Hall from PwC and Tyler Clemens from Starbucks. Your knowledge and leadership really has really served you well, obviously, and served your communities well. And I think this was a great presentation, and we covered a lot in a short period of time. So I just want to thank you both for sharing and making it look easy. So thank you again.
Yeah. Thanks, Pam. Again, it's a great honor. I'd like to speak here, and very happy to speak about this topic. In case anybody has any questions sort of after this, again, just like, so when this when this sort of circulates afterwards, I'm happy to share my personal info for anybody that has any questions or just wants to follow up with me.
Terrific. Thank you, Logan. And I'm sure Tyler, you would as well, if anyone had any additional questions.
Yes. You can reach me anyway. Send a carrier, a smoke signal. I answer every question, every email, every message, always.
Well, good for you. You get the gold star tonight, because I will admit that I don't always see them all. So again, thank you all very much for attending tonight. This has been a great session, and thank you.